Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Large Format Photography Podcast. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by my co-host Andrew Bartram. Hello Andrew.
Hello Simon. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too. And you've already eaten into my notes now because I just wanted to say, first of all, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody.
Oh, sorry. We should rehearse it, shouldn't we?
We should do. We should. But you put me off every week anyway, so it's nothing's new there. But I just want to say that we had a great time doing the show in 2019 and we had some amazing guests and we rounded the year off with the quite wonderful Kate Miller-Wilson. And it was a case of, we thought, we've done 20, we've finished with a really good guest. We really need to do another one this year, and we decided no, let's just take a few weeks off and recharge our batteries and get back. And which is exactly what we are. We are back now. We're going to do things slightly differently to how we've done things before. Recently at least, where our guest is also effectively a co-host, and that our guest is on a little bit of a tight schedule. So we'll do our little catch-up as in the little chat that Andrew and I have about the things that we may have been up to the last few weeks. We'll put that at the back of the show. So here we are, New Year, and I'm delighted to say that we're going to start this year off with an industry big hitter. Because with us tonight we have Max Grew of the Intrepid Camera company. Hello, Max.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me on. Happy New Year.
It's great to have you here. We met you back at in March. It's got to be last year now.
Yeah, in Birmingham. It was. Yeah, at
the photography show. And if anybody has been on our Facebook page, at the top of the page is a brilliant photograph by Nigel Cliff. And at least two of the people in that photograph are very pleased with that photograph. But Andrew, you seem to be less happy about that photo for some reason.
Yeah, well, people just have to look at it. I think you look
very nice, Andrew.
Do you think so?
I think it's a very nice picture of all three of us.
I agree. So we finally got the third person on that photograph to be with us, and we've been chatting about doing this for some time. I remember when I bumped into you twice at the show saying we're going to have you on the show, and then it's finally happened. So it's great to have you here. Now you've got quite a few things to talk about, some new stuff and some stuff that's been going on relatively recently with Intrepid. But I think let's start off with a bit of a roundup of how you got here. We don't have to go into a huge amount of detail because the story's out there in print, and Sunny 16 was nearly 2 years ago now. I think you were on there. So if you can give us a little bit of an update as to a little bit of a bio, if you like, about Intrepid yourself, how you got here, and then we'll talk about some of the new stuff.
Sure, sounds good. So it started in 2014, which seems like a long time ago, and funnily enough, the large format photography industry was a completely different place back in 2014. It's mad how much has changed since then. So the company sort of started as a university project of looking into ways of making 4x5 cameras more sustainable. They were sort of not disappearing, but very much anyone who wanted to get into it was looking at the second-hand market, and sometimes that involved a lot of repair work and the knowledge of how to repair bellows and front standards, rear standards, all this thing. How to grind glass was sort of hidden in the depths of some incredibly useful but often hard to find forums if you're not sort of in the loop. So that got me started with the idea of making a camera that was sort of designed for the 21st century. So I went from there onto Kickstarter once I sort of finalised the designs, and on Kickstarter we very luckily, thanks to the support of an amazing community, raised way above what we were asking for. I think we were looking for about £16,000 and it went up to £63,000, which really blew me away. Yeah, I know, right? And from there we managed to go into sort of full production. I hired my first member of staff, James, who is now the head of production at Intrepid and is still working here, actually just left. And he is working and managing a team of 6 people now. So that's really cool. So from there we went into production after the Kickstarter. We started in a little garage in Hove on the seafront, me and James, and we built the first 400 or so cameras. It took us about a year longer than we said it would in classic Kickstarter style. And then after that, we moved to a much bigger workshop and did a second Kickstarter for the 8x10 camera, which again really blew us away with how much support we got for that. I think we were looking for 22,000 and it got up to over £200,000 in the end.
Wow.
And it just sort of reaffirmed how much of a demand there was and an interest in large format photography and how much people wanted to get into it. And from there we moved to the workshop we are in now, which we moved to just before Christmas, which is sort of a dedicated factory for Intrepid, where we've got dedicated production lines, we've hired some more people, cameras are flying out at a much quicker rate than ever before, which our customers will be happy to hear. And like I said at the beginning, the large format photography industry seems a completely different place to what it was in 2013 when I was first thinking about this, and it's really been a revival, not just down to Intrepid but down to sort of the community around this. It's been sort of an incredible roller coaster of a journey to be on and very rewarding to be part of.
Yeah, I mean I think we both, Andrew and I, sort of felt that at the time when we were chatting last year about doing this podcast. Back then there was a feeling that there was something going on, and that is escalated, and it certainly appears to be growing all the time, which is absolutely fantastic news. Just out of interest, there you've just mentioned there that you're doing well with keeping up with demand. I mean, if somebody bought a camera off your website today, how long do you think it would take before they would actually see that?
So at the minute it's about 6 to 8 weeks. People might cringe a bit at me saying that, who have got orders waiting, because over Christmas and because of the move of the workshop, the orders did go up in terms of wait time, but we have managed to get it back down now to 6 to 8 weeks. The reason it takes that time is because an order comes in and then the camera is literally lovingly handmade by us. We don't outsource anything really. The aluminium parts are cut by us on our CNC machines, the bellows are made by us, the glass is ground by us. We sand and varnish all the wood, we assemble everything, so it's very much all in-house, which is part of the reason the cameras are affordable, because we have complete control over manufacturing. But it's also the reason it takes a little bit longer to get out to people. But the current aim, and the team is really working really hard to achieve this, is to get the lead time down to 1 week by the 31st of March. So that's been the big project that we're working on at the minute. Lots of work on efficiency for production lines, hiring new staff, making parts easier to make, easier to assemble, and sort of redesigning how we do things to get down to that target. And so far it's looking good, like we will be able to get down to a week lead time by the 31st of March, so people will be able to place an order on a Monday and hopefully get their camera by Friday, which is pretty cool.
I mean, that must put, you must have a huge amount of confidence there in the way that things are actually going in the industry and for yourself, and no doubt, you know, future lines coming on stream as well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm not within it. You know, it's a tough sort of. There's no sort of existing models for like how there's been a sudden comeback in this industry. It's quite hard to find sort of any case studies online. A lot of people compare it to the way vinyl has made a comeback, and it's kind of, I find it quite easy to understand how human beings would want something more tangible, more physical product in a world that's gone very digital, and that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. So I'm confident in sort of my understanding of what, sort of, not to be too sort of airy about it, confident in my understanding of human nature to think that as we take more and more pictures on our phones, people will also become more and more interested in the complete opposite, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. Max, that last point about people taking more and more pictures on their phones and creating a general interest in photography, I absolutely buy into that. And you know, the interesting thing with this resurgence of analog photography is that if folks get interested and they want to go and buy a 35mm camera, they immediately got to go to eBay or to Facebook Marketplace or somewhere, and you're looking at buying a camera which is, could be 40, 50 years old. And it's really interesting that actually there are now new cameras being produced, but there aren't any new, well, at the moment, 35mm cameras being produced, not really any medium format, certainly not in the kind of production that you guys have got set up now. Now, this is going somewhere, this line of questioning, because how many cameras do you think have gone into the market? I mean, there are others doing it as well, but you're the guys who are sort of leading the way with the production lines. I mean, I don't know if you're happy to say it or not, and it's absolutely fine if you don't. But I imagine it's thousands. But how many cameras have you sold from day one to broaden that pool?
I know I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but I know it's over 5,000 4x5s.
Yeah. So
quite a few.
That's remarkable. What I'm really interested in is, what about lenses? Because no one's making the lenses, are there? And I'm really worried.
That's a really good point.
I'm really worried that I got my large format camera. In fact, my first one was the Intrepid. No, it wasn't the Intrepid Mark One. I bought a Sinar before that, but then I backed the Kickstarter, so that was a few years ago now, wasn't it?
Nice.
And camera lenses were readily available, and they look to be still readily available. But I imagine they must eventually start getting in short supply.
So I've done a bit of research into it, and the thing that makes me confident that that's not necessarily going to be a problem is when you think about the economies of scale of the companies who used to produce these lenses, so particularly the modern lenses, the Fujis, the Rodenstocks, the Nikkels and the Schneiders. When you think about the economies of scale they had to produce those lenses at, we're operating in a completely different market now. It feels big to us because it's come from very, very small, but for them, when they were operating large format photography, it was still a niche within photography, as in most people would be shooting 35mm 120, etc. But it was a much, much bigger market then than it is now. So you've still got the legacy of all those lenses. And when you think about the type of person who would have been shooting large format, you tend to have someone who was sort of professional studio photographer and advertising and still life and things like that. And these are the type of people who sort of looked after their gear necessarily. It wasn't really like a amateur photography market so much. And there were depressed photographers. So I think you can still quite easily find a lot of well looked after second-hand lenses. The only issue I see with the lenses going forward, and I think I've mentioned this before, and I think it'd be really interesting to see if a sort of digital solution is the shutter maintenance. And when shutters start to break down, is the knowledge out there for people to fix them? Because the glass, if you look after it, will last forever, but the shutter's a very complicated mechanical thing, and with use it will wear down. So we're going to reach a point where we're sort of in peak shutter decline, and what do we do? What do we do then, basically?
But I suppose, I mean, I don't know. I don't take things apart, but as far as shutters go, large format shutters, I'm going to jump in and say they must be some of the, easier ones to keep going, maybe compared with like a curtain shutter on a 35mm camera, one that follows each other apart. Where the two.
I think you're right. They generally are simple, but it's just think about who going forward is just repairing cameras full stop as well, because
where's the knowledge?
I mean cameras, modern digital cameras go wrong, and there are people out there that repair them. I mean the John Machin, who I send all my stuff to, is a dealer in photography equipment. If something goes wrong, it goes to John, and his business is primarily modern cameras, but he just likes to have a go at the old stuff. I took my speed graphic to him today, and I'll talk a little bit more later. And I've mentioned a little problem with it, and he was just, his eyes lit up, and he wanted to have a go at it because it was different. It's not taking a printed circuit board out, and it's not replacing a chip or something like that. It's like real mechanics, if you like. But that ultimately is, and that's really where the problem is, because those skills that he has from times gone just aren't as applicable now as they used to be, because it's more about swapping things out and putting a new piece in rather than understanding the mechanics and the clockwork elements of it and so on. So I think, I don't know if it's a case, I don't know where the watch industry is at the moment, but if there are watch repairers out there, and if they're still making clockwork, I don't know where the watch industry is, but that might be a direction. But I imagine a watchmaker, a watch repairer, is probably capable of repairing a shutter on a large format camera, I reckon.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think one potential solution is sort of, I mean, it's hard to think of a solution that replaces shutters because there's so many different mounts, different screw threads, different thicknesses they have to be for different lenses. It's very hard to see how there could be some sort of universal solution. So it would probably have to be sort of a repair, or maybe some sort of very detailed guide for sort of basic shutter maintenance to sort of keep them going longer. But I mean, again, I've had shutters that are very old and I've had to do nothing to keep them going, and they still work very well. They're very hardy items, not to worry. I'm not trying to worry people. I just could see how that would become a problem before lenses become a problem potentially.
I've just over Christmas I was looking up at a camera that's been lurking on my shelf for a long time. I can't even remember where I got it from. It's in fact, I didn't know what it was at first, but until I took it down off the shelf and dusted it and realised it was a Kodak 3A folding camera. And when I took the back off it, it had pretty much the same negative space as a 4x5 camera. But the camera, the bellows were shot and everything, and it was just knackered. So I took the lens off, and in 1907, and I managed to prise the back element off, or unscrew the back element, clean the glass. It had gone a bit hazy. Screw it all back together. And the shutter on that, this is 1907, honestly, at every single time, just works perfectly. It's incredible.
Yeah, so they're fairly hardy things, which is good to, it's good to know. It's nice to hear that story, because this is the type of thing that keeps me up at night. So.
I don't want to depress you, but there are plenty of things that can go wrong with glass in a lens. That can.
I know.
Yeah, so I've seen plenty of things that Balsan separation is probably one of the biggest issues with older lenses. Yeah. And that's certainly not easy or cheap or even sometimes possible to fix, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
I just want to take you back to the start of things, because you said that you wanted to, I'm not sure if I'm quoting you correctly, by making a large format camera for the 21st century or something on those lines, and that, I think that's quite an interesting thought process, because most large format cameras have a certain look about them, and yours doesn't look that way. It is nothing. As far as I'm concerned, nothing looks like an Intrepid camera, and there's a design philosophy that went into making that. I'm just wondering if you wanted to chat a little bit about some of the decisions that you made to why certain things look as they do.
Yeah, no, I'd love to chat about it. I mean, you've touched on one of my sort of greatest sort of hobbies and passions in life, which is sort of the design side of things, and. Yeah, the design of the camera is very much informed by the manufacturing method and the material choices. So, in order to make the camera light, we had to use birch plywood, which is sort of a furniture grade engineering material, which it's very stable, holds its shape. It's also very light and very easy to machine. And the aluminium is also a material that's easy to work with, easy to outsource parts to, and it's also very lightweight, which is useful because that's one of the unique points about a camera, is how light it is. So once we were limited to sort of the materials that we could use and the way we could work with them, you kind of have a very sort of informed, you're quite narrowed down with the way the object can look because of the material choices, if that makes sense. So the reason sort of some IKEA furniture looks like IKEA furniture is because they're very limited to materials, and people have said that if IKEA made a large format camera, it would look like an Intrepid. Yeah. I'm not sure whether that's a compliment or not. So that's sort of the way it looks. The way it is because it's not a sort of a laboured over carpenter's object. It's not something that someone's devoted several weeks to making just one, and they've with these sort of hand tools. It's very much sort of made on modern machinery and then assembled by hand and finished by hand. So that's sort of why the way it looks it does, because the machines that we use to make it have never been used to make large format cameras before he came along.
Okay, and you mentioned there you use certain materials because they were light. So that lightness was something from the outset that you wanted to hit either a certain point, or you just wanted to make it as light as you could.
Yeah, it was a balance between it being sturdy and rigid and light. But from the large format cameras I'd used previously, one thing I noticed about a lot of them was, if you were sort of using them for hike, if you want to take them on a hike, or you were sort of using them for more sort of landscape outdoors photography, there was sort of a lot of bells and whistles and features and elaborate parts of them that weren't strictly necessary for that type of photography. And I was interested in sort of stripping all that back to basics, where you've got all the features you need, but it doesn't necessarily need to be made out of mahogany with 5mm of varnish on it and elaborate brass plating. As beautiful as those cameras are, it doesn't really have a massive effect on the image you take. That's between sort of you and the lens. The camera is a useful box in the middle, and I was very interested in keeping the box as usable and useful and light as possible.
Yeah, and you're on the Mark. Is it the Mark IV now with 4x5?
Mark IV with the 4x5 and the Mark II with the 8x10.
That's it. So what? I mean, it's. You've had a few iterations then in a relatively short period of time. So I'm just wondering what were the drivers from the initial one to where you are now, and at what point do you make that decision? I think we should move over to making it this way, or using that feature from this point onwards.
Yeah, exactly. So we've done an iteration a year since we started. But I will say with the Mark IV and the Mark II, we're sticking with them for the time forward. We're going to make sort of little minor changes which are somewhat to do with production and somewhat to do with adding features. But I think that the design we've sort of settled on now is a very good base to make small changes to, rather than make any sort of very big changes like we did with the previous generations. So the Mark I was, the main thing that's changed is sort of us as a company and how we've learned to make things and how we've scaled up, and suddenly certain features don't make sense when you've got bigger and you're producing thousands of things rather than tens of things. You can't really. And so in the Mark I, the base was a bit bigger. It had a lot more components. We've always tried to sort of reduce the amount of components and sort of reduce the weight and make the camera a lot easier and smoother to use. And that's been what sort of informed the changes at each point. And when we sort of come up with a new idea, particularly the base between the Mark III and the Mark IV was a very different change. Went from wood to aluminium and added steel linear guides, and went from a rack and pinion focusing mechanism to a rear focusing mechanism with a rod. And so when you make those big changes, you do have to release a new model, but we're always sort of updating the design in little ways to make it better to use.
So that change then from rack and pinion to the rod, was that driven by the changes of materials that you wanted to make, or did you actually just want to go to that rod-driven system?
So we always wanted to use that system. The reason we chose it was because the prices of the materials became affordable in our price range, and that was because of the sudden boom in the 3D printer market. And the rails and the rod we use are components from a 3D printer. So because those machines were being made in such quantities, all of a sudden the price point went down. So it's an interesting artifact. And the machine that they're from, we actually use as a machine in our workshop to produce the cameras, which is one of those things. But that's how manufacturing works. So yeah, one informed the other, and then they just loop round forever.
Is that a fairly unique design? I mean, I hadn't really. I mean, the
it's
Mark
similar
One.
To the who else uses it? It's not the same, but similar to the Chamonix camera.
Oh, is it?
It uses a rear focusing twisting knob, and I'm not sure about any others.
Chroma is now. I'm not sure if they did it initially, but they do use that now.
Do they?
Yeah. Oh, do they? I haven't seen that. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, the Mark IV is... I haven't got my Mark I now. I sold it to fund something else. But the Mark IV is quite a lot different. I think that was one of the things, having handled it at the photography show last year, I really couldn't believe it was almost like a different camera, you know?
Yeah, we've come... I mean, I've got a real soft spot for the Mark I, but we have come... The camera has come an awful long way. And like I said, the Mark 1 was sort of something that I built by hand each one, and it took ages, whereas the Mark 4 was very much a production line product. So that's informed the change. But also we've had so much feedback from the community who have been incredible throughout the process of saying what things they like, what things they don't like, what we can do better, and we've sort of poured that all in, and the Mark 4 came out, and we're really proud of it.
And just to take you back very, very, very slightly before I guess Simon wants to move on to other areas, but you talked about the lightweight and rigidity of the camera and getting all those features, sort of kind of designed into the camera. If you'd have listened back to the podcast, we've had both Ben Horn and Alan Brock on, and I think Ben's got your 8x10. I think Alan's uses a 4.5. I think
he used to. I'm not sure he uses it anymore. I think he had the Mark 3, but Ben uses the 8x10 Mark 2.
Yeah, and I've seen him use it on his videos, and he spoke about it on the show, and I know he's very impressed. I think he might have done a few tweaks to the front standard a bit, involving bits of gaffer tape, I think. But by and large, I think...
And then now we've implemented that into the design thanks to Ben's feedback, and that's very much how we work, which is really cool.
Awesome, that's brilliant. But he was very complimentary about this. The stability of it. He was actually comparing it with his Arca Swiss camera, which was a bit, it's not really comparing apples with apples, really, to be, without causing you offence, Max. They're different cameras.
But he was different cameras.
But the amount of movement in the front was about the same as his Arca Swiss, So.
Yeah, that video came out and I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, we've held up really well there.
You did, yeah.
It's a really good video.
Absolutely.
No, I was quite happy about that. And that's down to these, the rails. So they're linear guides is their technical term, which are these ground steel rails that are really, really rigid. And that's down to the addition of them. They just add so much rigidity to the base, which is where you want it. And and that's why it held up to an Arca Swiss, because of that design feature.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you've got 4x5, you've got 10x8. So when are we going to see 7x5?
Or 5x7?
Or 5x7?
Or 5x7, yeah. So, as I was saying earlier, we've been going sort of over 4 years now, and there wasn't much requests for the 5x7. And then over the last 6 months, there's been a real buzz about that format, and it's a format I've shot before and really like. It's a really nice sort of format to shoot, and Ilford sort of readily available to do black and white film for it. So I think we're going to start by doing a 5x7 back for 8x10, which is already a very compact and lightweight camera, so it's not too much bigger than a lot of 5x7 cameras. So that's a good place to start. And then if we can sort of build up an ecosystem in our factory for having regular 5x7 glass produced, the leaf springs produced for it, and the different sort of accessories and things like that, then I think it's certainly something we could add to our production line. But we've got a few other bits and bobs to take care of first, and then we will seriously look at it. Yeah.
Well, that'll be fantastic, and I think let's move on to the non-camera specific stuff, because after 10x8 and Mark 4s and Mark 2s and things like that, it was last year, wasn't it? Now, when you released your enlarger for 4x5 cameras.
So I think you two saw I think we had a demo unit at TPS in Birmingham. So yeah, and then we went on to Kickstarter shortly after that. So yeah, that's been out for a while now, and we've fulfilled the Kickstarter, and I think there's 6 left of people who we're still waiting to hear back from, and then we've had it up for general sale on the website for a while, and it's going really well. It's been one of the most rewarding products for me personally, because it's sort of completed that ecosystem between taking the picture and actually having a physical print, which is something that not a lot of people still do. I think it's very easy to take a picture and scan it and share it that way and print it digitally, which is a very rewarding type of photography in itself, but it's also very interesting to try and create that print without having any computers involved at all. And I think that to be able to share that with people and get people excited about that has been it's been really exciting for us. So particularly seeing I mean, it always comes back round to people taking pictures of what they're doing, but to see people sort of sharing on Instagram that they've been in the darkroom with our equipment and they've got these prints now hanging up on the walls in their house, that's quite cool.
Now you print, I know, Max, because you were speaking about it off air. Not that anyone can see any of your photos because you hate social media, but you do print. What equipment do you use, if you don't mind my asking?
So in Brighton, there's a community darkroom which Intrepid Camera is a member of. It's based up in the Hanover side of Brighton, and it's very conveniently a 30-second walk away from my house.
And so I'm hoping you're going to tell me they have De Beer enlargers, because De Beer are just around the corner from you.
Of course they do, yeah. Yeah, they have a De Beer enlargers, and they've got a De Beer enlarger. So it's nice. It's a small dark room, so you rent it out for the day, and it's yours, the whole space for the day. You're the only person in there. Awesome. So I use either the De Beer enlarger, which goes up to medium format, or I use one of our enlargers and my 4x5 camera to enlarge 4x5, and it's a nice space. So I would highly recommend, if anyone is listening, any Brightonians out there, I'd highly recommend getting involved with that darkroom. It's a completely community-run, not-for-profit thing, and it's a lovely place to spend a day and make some prints.
Have they got a web presence?
I think it's Brighton Community Darkroom is what it's called. If you Google that, you won't miss it.
Okay, we'll check that out, and if we can find a link, we'll drop that into the show notes.
Yeah,
cool. Cheers.
Yeah. One of the highlights of last year, at the back end of last year, was doing the photo walk in Worcester that Hamish Gill organised of 35 MMC, and then the evening was doing the viewing of One Shot Inch and Down, and
nice.
and David was there. Simon couldn't make it, but David was there, and that's the first time I actually saw the enlarger in action. In the world's largest darkroom, and I just think that was just so cool that you were involved in that. I mean, not only used an Intrepid camera, but the enlarger was the exciting part for me. It was his first time it being used and so on.
Yeah, because they had sort of a pre-Kickstarter, really early model, and I was sort of nervous that something would go. You always think when you build stuff, you always think, something's going to go wrong. It won't work. And then to see the final print they made and it being developed in those paddling pools, because it was so massive, and it was great. And it was really nice to meet Simon as well. Simon came down to the workshop to get everything, and I think he even kipped in his van outside the workshop for a few days, so it was nice to have him about. And it was really great to be involved. I'm hoping we'll be able to do a screening in the Intrepid factory of that, but we're still in the works of working that all out, but that'd be really cool. Well,
you've got a link to the story with a few photographs on your I have to say, I haven't looked at it in a while, your blog on your website, which is brilliant. There's some great,
so that's one of the things I really wanted to mention, if that's all right. I know it's going to be an outright plug, but
no, you plug away, mate. It's fine.
Naomi, who does all of that side of things, is very talented in sort of photographer and in terms of interviewing people. She's put an immense amount of work into the blog over the last year, and we've got the likes of Alex Soth, Jason Lee, Brendan Barry, Andrea Costa on there, and we don't get much press as like a blog website because of what we do predominantly as a manufacturer of cameras, so it kind of gets hidden on the wayside sometimes, but it's a really good blog. We've also got some like really good educational articles on there about how to use the zone system and things like that. Yeah, well, you've got Richard Pickup. I think you've been coordinating with. We had him on the show, and we've had Matt on as well. So I'm already looking at your blog and think, these people look interesting. Maybe we should reach out to some of these folks. Yeah, totally. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Richard's an absolute hero to do that. So big shout out to Richard Pickup. So please do check out our blog, because an awful lot of work goes into it, and it's something that we're really. I remember looking at your last time I looked at your blog. I think you had 2 or 3 stories on there. Now it's like on 4 pages, and there's all sorts of things. Yeah, that was when I was doing it, so it's much better now. It's great. I'm just thinking. I'm just conscious that we're talking about the enlarger, the Intrepid enlarger, but we've not actually touched upon how that actually works. And I'm just wondering if you could just give our listeners a bit of a rundown
the fact that we're on, there's no pictures here, so you've got to be quite descriptive.
No worries.
But if you can just explain how it works and what it's about, then I think that will help a lot of people.
Yeah, cool. So our enlarger is not a separate unit as you would expect an enlarger to be. It's actually a light box and negative carrier attachment that goes onto the back of any 4x5 camera, either underneath the ground glass or using Graflock clips. And then it essentially converts your 4x5 camera into an enlarger by projecting your developed negative back through the camera and through a lens. Now, you can even use a normal large format taking lens. Some people say that using the lens you took the picture with to then print it is a very pure type of photography, if that's what you're into. Or you can use a standard enlarger lens, and with the kit you get a lens board adapter that lets you use standard enlarging lenses, and also an adapter that lets you use the Ilford multigrade filters. So essentially converts your camera into a fully functioning 4x5 enlarger, and then when you're done you can pack it away and it all fits in a shoebox which you can keep under the stairs, rather than having a massive enlarger in your house somewhere and not knowing what to do with it when you only use it. Realistically, people only print from time to time, so it's nice to have something that doesn't take up a huge part of your house. You can convert your bathroom into a darkroom very easily with this.
Excellent. And so we all know about the 4x5 enlarger. Are there any plans to do anything else with enlargers?
Good question. So yes, we are going to do an 8x10 version of our 4x5 enlarger, which is going to be a first for us because it's a product that did not previously exist. So obviously 4x5 cameras, 8x10 cameras, and there used to be a thing called a graph enlarger, which is similar to our 4x5 enlarger, but there was never an 8x10 version. So since I think we've definitely proved the concept with the 4x5 one, we've got over 1,000 of them out there now, and all the fears of them being hard to line up and not reliable have been completely pushed to one side, and we've got people making incredibly detailed and sharp and beautiful prints with them with quite a lot of ease, to be honest. So I think it's time to scale up to 8x10. So we'll be launching that around the time of the photography show in March, actually, for this year's show.
Right, and
you heard it here, folks.
Yeah, breaking news. First show of the year, and we've actually got something new on it.
Yeah, very excited. We're really excited about it. It's there's been a few design challenges. It has to be a lot slimmer than the 4x5 enlarger because to really nerd out, the 8x10 cameras don't have a rear clipping system like 4x5 cameras do, so it has to go underneath the ground glass. So therefore it can only be as thick as a film holder in a little bit. So it's different to our 4x5 enlarger. But I think, I know we've achieved it. So excited to bring it to the world.
No, that's fantastic. And when you say in time for the photography show, you are going to have we saw you there last year, so you're going to be there again this year, yeah?
Yeah, there'll be 3 of us there this year. We've got a stand right by the analog zone, which we can talk more about. And we've got we'll have an array of cameras, loads of stuff for people to play with. We can have a couple of enlargers set up. I'm even hoping to have a 8x10 camera set up with some instant film that people can play with and take some shots, and maybe some Fuji FP as well, so people can really get a chance to see how the whole 4x5 ecosystem works, but using a bit of instant film just to make it a bit more accessible. So yeah, we're really excited to be there. There's going to be 3 of us. It's going to be myself, Naomi and Rocco. Rocco's part of the production team, and Naomi, as I mentioned, is part of the branding and communications and all that good stuff. So yeah, it should be a good laugh. We were
chatting earlier, and your stand is you're not just like picking last year's stand up. You've got a new stand, and it's a fair size larger as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've doubled the size of the stand. So before, our stand was it effectively became a bit of a counter, and we got told off for blocking because it was quite a busy stand. We got told off for blocking the path a few times because people were crowding around the stand, but no one could actually come onto it. So this time we've made the stand so people can come on and really have a play with the cameras and sort of welcome them into the stand rather than everyone having to sort of stand in front of it and have a look. So
yeah. You're a victim of your own success there, weren't you?
Well, I think
it was a busy show.
we contributed to that, I think, at one point, because there was probably 30 or 40 at an analog meetup, which is going to be repeated this year, kind of headed by Hamish Gill and Sunny 16 guys, and we split them into, was it 2 groups, Simon? I can't remember, but there was
Yeah, there was.
We just wandered about, didn't we? Really?
Yeah, there was what was it? Graham announced this huge number of people. Okay, so who wants to come with me, as in Graham, and then who wants to go with Simon and Andrew? And
yeah, we didn't get many, did we?
Almost the entire room didn't go, and I think the people that did stay, they were there thinking, well, it'd be, let's just a bit of solidarity. Shoot film, be nice. Was the attitude that came round with us. But when we did bring our lot round, it did quite swamp your stand. So, but
it was good fun. It was nice to see everyone.
Oh, it was great. And now this year, you've already touched upon it. There is the is analog zone the correct word? Is that the right?
I believe so. So this has been very much organised by the living legend, which is Hamish Gill, and I believe it's officially called the analog zone. So we'll be, as you come into the hall, we'll be on the left-hand side, and it's going to have loads of really exciting people there. There's going to be a big zone which has got lots of little tables in it with loads of analog companies demonstrating their products, and loads of people you can meet who you would have heard about online. So you'll be able to see loads of stuff, and then we'll be not on that bit, but we'll be directly opposite on our stand, and then I think there's a few other stands around that area who will have for other analog companies. And it's the analog presence at the photography show is so big this year that the photography show has had to dedicate a zone to it. Now, there hasn't been a zone specifically for analog photography for a very long time. So
there's a lot of small makers of things.
Exactly,
I'm struggling to think what they might be at the moment, but there are, I know, who perhaps couldn't afford their own stand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is sort of a much more affordable way for the small.
What I really want is like, is there going to be an analog coffee shop in the middle of it all? Because then I wouldn't want to go anywhere. I'll just stay there the whole time. So I've got no interest in looking at.
I'll see if we can arrange sort of a nice seating area and some.
You should. Yeah, some sofas and some coffee machines.
Yeah. That sounds good to me.
Awesome.
No, I'm really really looking forward to it this year, and from a herding cats perspective that we had last year. I think Graham turned grey last year trying to keep his group together. It was hard enough with our group, and I think actually, frankly, we gave up eventually.
We did give up, yeah.
But having
it was a very busy show.
Oh, it was, but having things just dotted around all over the place was an absolute pain. So when we do the analog meetup this year, it's going to be a bit different, but largely because there'll probably be like a get together like we had initially, because I think that worked quite well. And then it's a case of there you go, there's the analog zone, off you go. Although I'm sure there are going to be some things that we've got up our sleeve to make it interesting as well, which I'll leave that to the Sunday 16 people to talk about that in more detail. But yeah, really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, same. That should be good fun.
So as well as cameras and the enlargers that you'll have to either look at or to sell on your stand, you've been selling some new film stocks, or because your film stocks have become a big thing for you, haven't they, on your online store?
Yeah, so we've got quite a good range of films. And for a while, we were the only people in Europe with Velvia 50 supply line, but unfortunately, that has now dried up. But the new stocks we've got coming out this week are the Ortho 80 that Ilford very successfully launched whilst we were with them in New York, which was very exciting. And we've got that in 4x5 and hopefully 8x10 soon.
Because that's been tricky to find. The Ortho 80 from Ilford, I bought some, but it's not been in stock in a lot of places.
Yeah, I think it was a lot more popular than I knew it was going to be popular, but I think it was basically really popular. So it's a classic case of it selling quickly. And then we were also going to have the new Ektachrome stock in 4x5 as well, which is I'm excited to see. And that's actually priced. I mean, I don't want to say it too loudly in case they've made a mistake, but it's actually priced really well for a 4x5 slide film. So I think people are going to be. It's really accessible in terms of being able to buy a box of it, as opposed to when you think about Velvia 50 being over £100, the Ektachrome's going to be nothing like that. So
yeah, you had
going to see a lot of people shoot that.
You've got the Fuji. I noticed you got the Fuji Velvia 50 sold out on £138 for a box of.
Yeah, that was the cheapest we could get.
You're going to say a box of 10, aren't you, or something for that? It must be.
It was a box of 20, I think.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah, but that's I mean, it's still huge. It's a massive upfront cost for 20 shots.
Yeah, it's got like Foma Pan 100 that I shoot.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But you've got the cat labs, the cat lab stuff as well, haven't you?
So sorry to interrupt. Someone's just at the door. We're about to pause for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Right, I'll be right back. I think it's a neighbour.
I'd like to shoot some colour 4x5 film, but involves scanning it, and I just can't be asked with that, to be honest.
I mean, my take on it is I'm just not good enough to shoot colour yet. I'm still struggling to get good shots out of black and white at the moment, but I think once I've got some level of competence, shooting colour is definitely something I'd love to do. I mean, it's the same with 4x5 or large format in general. Nothing, if you get it right, it's special, and I'm sure 10x8 is even more special, and so on. But the same is going to apply with colour, and some of the images I've seen that are shot with colour, whether it be Alan Brock or what's his name, Ben Horn, are just stunning. And the Alan Brock ones that really surprised me, that they were taken with Ektar. A lot of them, and I mean, sometimes I think you can tell the difference between colour negative and slide film, but I was convinced his Ektar shots were taken with slide film, and I was wrong.
Yeah, it's interesting. Max's site, the blog has certainly come a long way from when I first looked at it, and also, so I was just. How are you just going to do a pause and carry on, Simon?
Yeah, I guess so. I think.
Sorry, sorry about that. It was my car was in the way.
We'll edit that however it works. Who knows? Might just keep everything in. Actually, you never know. We'll see. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, carrying on a thing I was just muttering to Simon about your website and following on from how good I think your blog is. Is it the intention that your site is almost going to become like the go-to place for large format photography, because you can buy stuff there, you can learn stuff there, and there's got to be far more scope for learning and like a hub of all things large format?
Yeah, I think definitely in terms of the learning and education side of it, we're really interested in becoming sort of a repository for any 4x5 question you might have. And that's really important with getting people into it for the first time, which is really important for the whole ecosystem continuing.
I'm just going to say that I think there's a mobile phone very close to a speaker at the moment, a microphone. I don't know who's got that one.
Well, mine's been on all the time. I'm just turning it off just in case it is mine, but it's off now anyway.
Yeah, I'm not hearing it now. Please carry on.
Cool. So that's all right. So I was saying, so we want the site to become sort of a repository for all large format knowledge. If you've got any questions, we'd like to have the answer on our website. We've done quite a lot of videos recently. We've been working with a videographer to come up with some cool videos with sort of lens buying guides, because that can be a bit daunting if you get into it the first time. Developing prints, even like the darkroom side of things as well. How to load film into film holders. Good tips for that. What you need, just like getting your head around what actual equipment you're going to require to shoot large format. So yeah, we're very interested in having very accessible information about how to use large format cameras and to get people excited about the idea of using them if people are considering it.
Richard Osterland, if that's how you pronounce it, it's Guide to Wet Plate Collodion, I've just seen.
Yeah, that's a cool one. That's worth checking out.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there's loads of stuff on there.
I think that's probably a good place for us to start to wind down this section of the podcast, at least anyway, because I know that Max is on a bit of a schedule and he's been very generous with his time. So is there anything else you might want to get off your chest while you're still with us?
Has this become a bit of a counselling session?
Yeah.
I'm very overworked, if I'm being honest, guys. Now, what we've got coming up, which I'm particularly excited about, Naomi's given me a list of things to mention. So, the zine, we did a zine last year, which I'm reliably informed is a small informal magazine. We did one last year that was really successful. We managed to get loads of people who have been out shooting on their 4x5 cameras to send in work. We put it all together, made it look nice, printed it, and then put it out into the world. So at cost, really, just so people could share their work.
I have a copy of that, and it's got pictures in it. Yeah, I've got a copy, and it's got pictures and words in as well, which I love. It's not just pictures, but it's got
not
some
just
words
pictures.
in as well.
Yeah, there's words. So people are sort of explaining their work.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'd thoroughly recommend that. So I'll look forward to seeing issue 2.
Nice one. Yeah, we've got issue number 2 coming out next month, and we'll have loads of them at the photography show. We only printed 200 of issue 1, so we're going to print a few more of issue 2 because it sold out in a day. So obviously,
wow, did it?
A few people who so there's a few people who missed out.
I might put mine on eBay.
More of issue 2. It's quite a rare item. We did a little re-release. We did a few more. We got another couple of hundred printed, and then they sold out in a day again. So
goodness me!
I think there's a lot of people who enjoy looking at and sharing tangible images and physical work. So got that coming out. What else? Oh, we've also teamed up with Wanderer Photo Gear, based out of the US. We've got loads of new camera wraps and cloths to put over your head. I've forgotten the name of them. Cloths to put over your head whilst you're taking the picture. And loads of things like that. That's all very cool on our website, so they're worth checking out.
Yep.
And we've also got a new series of videos that if anyone is interested in being involved with, please do get in touch, called Peel Pals. The first one is on YouTube, which features Willem Verbeek and Dan Rubin when we were in New York with Ilford at the Photo Plus show.
Oh, yeah.
And it's basically we give people a camera and a pack of Fuji FP 100C, and then they go out into the world and have some fun with it, take some pictures, and we just do a bit of chat about large format and photography and things like that. And it's nice. So the first one of those is up on YouTube now. It's worth checking out. And I think that is everything.
Excellent. Well, it's been great having you on the show, and thanks for being our first guest of 2020.
Oh, it's been an honour. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So, outside of this podcast, what's the best way for people to find out more about the Intrepid Camera Company?
So we've got loads of info on our website, which is intrepidcamera.co.uk. Sorry, should know that by now. We've also got loads of stuff on Instagram. If you just search for Intrepid Camera on Instagram. And the main way to find users and people with experience and people just generally chatting about tips and tricks and using our cameras is on the Facebook group, which is called the Official Intrepid Camera Users Group, which is completely run by users. We're on the group, but just to sort of offer advice for stuff that people are struggling with. And that's a really great repository of knowledge. And like I said before, check out the blog if you want to see what people are up to with the cameras as well.
Excellent. Well, that's been brilliant. Thank you very much for being with us and taking the time out. And
no worries.
Yeah, that's good. Andrew?
Cool.
Yeah, thank you very much, Max. And we look forward to seeing you.
Guys.
We look forward to seeing you in whenever it is, March, April.
We'll see you in March, at the photo show. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your podcast, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we can talk about you now you've gone.
Oh, God.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Max.
Bye.
Awesome.
Bye-bye. Right, and so we'll do part one of what we normally do at the start of the show. We'll do that now. But that was great having that chat with Max. It's been something that he's been on our list for being a guest from day one, and we've finally done it. So that's great news. Although that list was massive, isn't it? Even now.
Yeah. Well, yes, and I'm loath to add more to it, but I think some of these people he's got on his blog are certainly worth at some point contacting. Because they look really interesting people.
Yeah. So then, it's been a while.
It has.
It has. So, what have you been up to, Andrew?
Goodness me, when did I can't think. It's weeks, isn't it?
It is.
I made a list. Hang on, I did make a list of things I've been up to. Where is it?
It's almost as if we had planned to do this.
Yeah. I visited Dave Shrimpton. Did I tell you about that?
We've had a little chat about it, and I think you've mentioned it in our Facebook group. But
I visited Dave really just to go and have some coffee with him, and it was an excuse for him to get all these beautiful cameras out and show them to me and make me feel awfully jealous. And then we had coffee and Kit Kats because that's what he eats for lunch, and then we went into his workshop and his darkroom and his studio, and Dave runs workshops, and if you get a chance, folks, to join up on one of Dave's workshops, you'll have a wonderful day. You'll be inspired, you'll be amazed, He lives in a. You might break your car getting to where he lives because it's down a bumpy old track. And I turned up and he said, "Oh, you didn't wash your car before you came down here, did you?" I said, "Yeah, I did yesterday." There was some bloke in the road mending potholes as I went down. That was his neighbour, I think. And so it's just this. He just lives in this, what I can only describe as a creative space. He has a bit of a day job, which is largely involves around working at 1 day a week, I think, or a couple of days a month. I don't know what it is, for the company that he used to own. I think it's a design company or a print company or something. To be honest, I've forgotten now, but it's one of those sort of things. And so he keeps his hand in, and I think that keeps him going in film and lovely lenses that he buys on eBay. And then he runs workshops to supplement all of that and pay his gas bill, I suppose, and keep him in Kit Kats. So, but he's a lovely chap, and it was really good to meet him. And I was there for probably 4 or 5 hours, maybe 4 hours, and learned loads. Really, just looking at he's got those Graflex SLRs, which I slung around my neck, and it's super comfortable to use. And he had a big projector lens on it. I want to say it was a Bauer projection lens. It was something like that. You'll know, Simon, probably.
I don't know how to pronounce it. It's more like Buell or something like that.
Yes, that's one of those anyway. Yeah. It's a big kind of orange thing it was, probably about 4 or 5 inches across. Not like the kind of projector lens that goes in my Kodak carousel. This was a big thing in there. But I think he said they're reasonably inexpensive.
I think compared to, say, an Aero Hector, I think they're certainly more affordable. Those the downside with them, of course, is you don't get an aperture to play with. But really, if you're actually using a lens like that, the whole reason for using it is wide open, because it's a very fast lens, so you get a very, very small depth of field, so you get wacky effects.
He uses it a lot for those shots in the lane outside his house. So if you've seen any of the shots that he shared, or even that Hillary Clark shared recently with his perambulator parked in the middle of the lane, and that's pin sharp in the middle and crazy swirly round the outside. And I think you'd told me that was taken with an Aero Hector, but it wasn't. It was taken with that projection lens, and that's just incredible. And you go into his studio space, and he's got this wet plate camera on a massive wooden wheelie trolley thing, and it's some lovely wooden backs for it. And he picked all this stuff up for a song. I get really annoyed that people find all this gear and they don't pay much for it. And then he's got this other slightly smaller wet plate camera with his bowler hat over the lens, which acts as his shutter. And around this space, he's got like mannequins and dolls in. He drove down to the M25 somewhere to buy a jar full of broken doll parts because he liked the look of it, and that kind of just sits there. And so if you're just looking for inspiration, then he's got these barn door spotlights that you can just turn on. And it's all very creative, and I'm finding it hard to just describe, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful space. And even in his main house, he's got this kind of conservatory area, which reminded me of a Victorian studio. So it's got a chaise lounge and some ferns and books and loads of stuff around. But the lighting is like classic North light coming in through the ceiling and the walls. And he can just set his large format wet plate camera in the doorway, and that becomes almost like a little studio, And I had a thoroughly great day with him. So thank you, Dave, for that.
I mean, from what I've seen of his place, it looks like something that you get on a film where the children will leave the room and go to bed, and then everything just like comes to life.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as those mannequins don't start walking about, I don't mind. Yeah. I do find them a bit creepy.
Yeah. Well, we've got plans to I say speak to him properly. You spend 5 hours there, but we plan on going down to see Dave, and perhaps we might record a show while we're down there. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do that, but we do have a voice recorder. You're experienced on this now, having done the Odyssey De Vere episode. So,
well, it was a bit of a debacle, really, in terms of the way I did it. But I mean, yeah, we did it. It worked. Yeah. And we either borrow Neil Piper's recorder again, or we just buy our own. But it was fine. So what else have I been up to? I made a large format camera. You're impressed, aren't you?
I am.
Pinhole camera out of a coffee tin.
Yeah. Okay.
And I hand drilled the lens to 0.3 of a millimeter, or maybe 0.4. And Dave Shrimpton, when I first went into Dave's place, he was just finishing making some coffee can pinhole cameras. And he recommended the use of McDonald's wooden stirrers as film retainers. So particularly in a curved coffee can, glue 2 of these coffee stirrers in, get them the right size, and the film just kind of sits there, held between these 2 film stirrers. Well, I've taken his design and improved it, because I actually use Cineworld coffee stirrers, which aren't flat. They're kind of elliptical shapes, and when you glue those on, they actually hold the film a lot better, because they almost they do actually physically hold the film as opposed to just holding it in place. And because my 4x5 camera that I made isn't really a curved camera, it's got a slight curve to it, but it's kind of flat at the back. And I shot paper negative in it, Simon, and I rated the paper at ISO 3 and went outside in the garden over Christmas and stood in front of my garden shed for 8 minutes and moved my head a little bit because I wanted to be creative. And I got a beautiful paper negative. I'd never really shot paper negatives before. And it's got just enough shadow detail. It's got some highlights. And it looks great. So I was really chuffed. I made a beautiful Nescafe camera, and it's got a shutter on it that is a bit of brass shim that rotates around, and I can lift it out of the way to expose the pinhole. And I've pimped it with some Cosmo Photo stickers, so I was very pleased with that. So that was my pinhole and my 4x5 adventure in camera making. And then did I tell you that I'd also stripped off a lens from my Kodak 3A camera, and I've stuck that on my bomb camera, and I haven't used that yet, but that's got I was telling you about that when we were talking to Max, wasn't I?
I think it's news to our listeners, though. I think.
Was it? I've forgotten what I've said on air and what I haven't. Yeah. So I had this Kodak 3A camera, which I didn't know was a Kodak 3A camera. It was sitting on my shelf for many years, gathering dust, and I took it down off the shelf and realised that the film area, I don't know what sort of film it would have taken, but it was a roll film, but it was a huge roll film because it had an old wooden spiral film spool in the back. But the actual image area was pretty much 4x5. It wasn't. It was whatever it was then, but it was. So I figured this little lens on the front would be more than adequate to give me some coverage. I didn't know what sort of movements I'd get, but at least I'd get some straight coverage. The image circle projected would be big enough, I reckoned, to do something interesting on my more modern large format cameras. So I stripped this lens off, which was easier than I thought it was going to be. And then I looked through it, and it was a bit kind of hazy, and I don't think there was any fungus through it. It was just a bit hazy. So I managed to unscrew the back element with the help of a bit of kitchen implement that I found to take lids off tin cans. Cleaned it with some isopropyl alcohol, dried it, and put it all back together. The shutter from a 1907 camera works pretty much to the second. 1 second is smooth, goes up to one. I think it might only go up to 1/100th of a second, but so that might limit me a bit. But it's I haven't actually shot anything through it yet, but I was very pleased with myself, and I mounted it on a board and stuffed it in the camera. Excellent. So that was fun.
I'm just trying to remember what that film was called. I've got in my head it's like 818 or something like that. I'm not too sure.
I don't know, but it's huge. Mm. I've thrown the camera away. The camera was in bits, really, to be truthful. It wasn't really worth. I did ask folks in our little large format photography podcast group, Facebook group, if it was worth trying to fix the camera. I think even Sandeha Lynch probably just sniggered when I posted it. So I ripped the lens off and thought, well, I'll use that. I was inspired because Alex Purcell had done something. I think he'd taken a single meniscus, single element lens off some old camera, and he'd got some beautiful, dreamy shots with his,
including a selfie as well, which was quite some doing as well. From reading what how he actually achieved,
and it was pin sharp, which is more than most of us can achieve.
Yeah,
just looking through the back of a camera, let alone doing a selfie.
Yeah, which possibly could bring us on to what I've been up to.
I tried to tee you up there.
Yeah, I thought that's where it was going, and because I've just put some pictures out. Oh, I've only put one picture out. I've taken.
I really like it, though. I have to say, I know you're a bit critical about focus, but I think it's a great picture.
I think that's just one of those things, isn't it? We're all probably overcritical of our own photographs, especially if we know they haven't turned out in the way that we want them to. And this was certainly the case with this photograph and the other 5 photographs which I haven't shared. All of which, every single one of them was back focused. And the issue that I had was I was using my newly adapted Aero Ectar lens to my still pretty new to me speed graphic.
Yeah,
shooting wide open at 2.5 with a 172mm lens with a wafer thin depth of field. I mean, I think it's one of those things. If you're doing this with a person and you're focusing on the eyes, and you're doing it using the ground glass, and then saying, right, hold still while I just put the film in and just stay there a little bit, and I've got everything else set up, and then that's it. I've taken the photograph now. There's easily enough time there for somebody to move a few millimeters or a percentage of an inch, which is enough to actually take the eyes out of focus. Because when I was actually focusing on it's a picture of my father that we're talking about here, and he wears spectacles, and when I was magnifying on the ground glass to get the very precise focus, I could choose, do I want to be on his glasses? Do I want to be on his eyeballs? Do I want to be on his eyebrows? It's the depth of field was tiny, so that was tricky for me. So every single shot was out of focus, and all of them were focused slightly behind, which is puzzling me a little bit. But I'm thinking, well, if there's consistency with my mistakes. It could be that I've just done the same thing and everybody else does the same thing, and they just tend to move backwards instead of moving forwards. Moving forward instead of backwards. Or there could be a discrepancy with my ground glass and film plane. And this was something that we were chatting about in the car only this afternoon, because I was just coming away from my lens repairman, and more on that later, and I've already touched upon that subject. And I'd already asked him, how often is it that the film plane and the ground glass aren't in the same place? And he looked at me like as if, well, there's never a problem. I've never had that problem, he was saying. And you rang me back, because I'd already been talking to you, and you rang me back, and you started quoting Ansel Adams at me, didn't you?
I did, yeah, because some things were going off I've read lots over the years. I don't always retain it, but I normally retain bits of lots of things, which is a very useful skill in life, I find. Other people have not, will call it some unkind things. But I went to Ansel Adams' book, The Camera, which I'll thoroughly recommend if you want to. If you want to buy all 3, it's the camera, the negative, and the print. But this one is the camera. And he talks a lot about constituent parts of not just large format cameras, but medium format, and to a lesser extent, small ones. He talks about bellows, extension. He talks about the way the image is formed, depth of focus, depth of field. He talks about camera movements, the Scheim-Flug principle. He promotes the use of beer mats. No, he doesn't really. But he does. On page 37, he says this. He says, one surface of the ground glass is textured ground to provide a plane for focusing the image. It's important that the ground surface face the lens, since this is the surface where the image is formed, and it must occupy exactly the same plane of the film when the holder is inserted. So I'm assuming he means by that cameras generally are set up so that the ground element faces the lens, and because that's the same plane where the film is. So that's, by implication, I think that's what he's saying. He says, in some cases, the ground glass will incorporate a Fresnel lens whose purpose is to provide even illumination over the entire pitch area. He doesn't say where that should be, but I think from the discussion we've had in the past and what folks say, it's not so critical. Although if you look on Intrepid's website, I was looking a little while ago, and Max talks about Fresnel lenses. He talks about it being on the person side of the ground glass, not on the lens side.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Simon. I'd be interesting little debate for folks listening. What you think of Ansel's quote? I guess he's right because he's Ansel Adams, you know.
Yeah.
So you're focusing. The ground glass is of a thickness, and so the actual point of focus will be at some point there. It can't be all the way through, because otherwise, it's got to be on one side or the other. So it kind of makes sense that it's going to be on the bit that's ground, and Ansel says that's the bit that faces the camera. Have you had a chance to look at yours yet since I've told you that, imparted that bit of wisdom to you?
Well, I've pulled my camera out as we speak, and I'm just looking at it now. And certainly the Fresnel, if that's what we're calling it, is on the user side. Yeah. And it's Arca Swiss, it says on it as well, which is nice. It's
an expensive bit of Fresnel
bit of plastic, yeah. But I'm looking at looking on the lens side of the camera, the internal side, and it doesn't look ground to me. This looks like the shiny bit.
Okay.
It's quite. It's not entirely obvious, but I would say that it's shiny. So I'm only guessing at this moment that underneath the Fresnel is the ground side. I need to look at this properly, and I'll dig out another camera just to see if the ground side can actually be shiny, just in case I'm being completely stupid.
I don't know. I have to say I haven't looked at mine yet, but I will do a bit later.
Yeah.
Probably do it tomorrow now when it's daylight and I can see properly.
Yeah, well, it's given me doubts now, certainly.
Well, you can always, as we said, you can, before you go poking around with it and changing it around, set something up, without a person in, and do some critical focusing wide open and see if they're as sharp as they appear to be.
Exactly, and that's the plan. Although I'm just looking at this now and just seeing just how easy it will be to actually swap out the glass panel, and it's not that straightforward. I can't see how it's done. There's no obvious way. On my Meridian, it's really obvious and it's simple, and I've taken the glass out before, but on this one, not so straightforward. I'm sure it is pretty straightforward, but I just need to look at it. So I don't know if I'm going to have a chance to do that before I go out tomorrow. But I was planning on using this camera tomorrow, and now I'm a little bit nervous about it because, if my screen is the wrong way round, then that would absolutely explain why all of my shots were in focus correctly. So,
well, according to Mr. Adams, it might do, yes.
Yeah.
Your father, I did try and enlarge the photograph on my screen. I think the focus looks to be pretty much on the collar behind his head, I think. Is that about right? Yeah,
exactly. All the shots are focused behind. All 6 shots consistently in more or less the same kind of area. So that's what's making me think, it could be a film plane issue, and if that screen is throwing me out, then there we go. That would explain a lot. So
there might be some really clever people listening who are just kind of guffawing at our conversation. So you're talking total nonsense.
Nothing new there, is there? But the thing is that somebody may have been using. Let's make the assumption that it's incorrect, and it's only an assumption. if somebody's been stopping this down to f12, 16, or whatever, it wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference.
No.
Yeah, so you could use this for donkey's years without having any problem. But you slap on there 172mm f2.5 with a razor fine depth of field, then your critical focus is critical. So,
it is.
So I may have discovered something there. So. Or maybe not. It might just be me, and I could just take a photograph and just see how it goes. So we'll see. We'll see.
And you've been 3D printing things galore.
I have, and that actually ties in with just going back to the fact that when I was chatting to you last, I was driving away from my lens repairman. I dropped in on him to say that I wanted to get the rangefinder adjusted because the horizontal wasn't quite in alignment on the speed graphic, and while I was chatting to him, I was saying, have a look at this. This is my Aero Ectar, which you've seen before, and I was showing off a 3D printed lens board that I'd designed and made and printed and fitted to my Aero Ectar, and I wasn't entirely happy with the way that it was fitting on the camera. And this is something I've posted on Instagram and Twitter and in the Facebook group. So there's lots of photos and things you can refer to here if you want to have a look at what I'm talking about. But the issue that I had was the lens, the back of the lens was too wide to go through the rear standard. And some people, having done a bit of research, they've filed down the rear standard in top, bottom, left and right, just to give it enough clearance, because it's almost like the thickness of paint that's stopping it going in there. But I didn't want to force it in, and I certainly didn't want to file down the camera. So what I'd actually done was just created this lens board that allowed the lens to sit effectively on the lens board with a long cylinder extension, which was actually not really an extension. It's just literally supporting the weight of the back part of the lens, and that was using a friction fit. It's because I couldn't print a thread that's as fine or would be as robust enough to actually cope with this lens. So so I just made the hole fractionally smaller than it needed to be, and then sand it down until the point where you could get the lens in, but it wouldn't drop out. Yeah. And that was working really well. But the problem is the first part is like that it's a really heavy lens on that camera. It's a 1.5 kilos. Not sure that is an old money, but I was never entirely happy about the fact that all of the weight was on the lens board. None of the weight was going through the lens board to try and even attempt to balance it. So I then printed a little stand for it, which sort of did the job, and that sort of brings us up to date. So I take this up to see John to have a look at the rangefinder, and we didn't really do much with the rangefinder because I told him about the lens not being big enough, and he then took it upon himself as being a bit of a challenge to make it right and to make it fit. And the initial thought was, well, just make this hole in the front standard a little bit bigger and it'll go in. And said, nope, not doing that. And he goes, well, how about taking a bit off the lens? Now, I was under the impression that there's like a cylinder at the rear of the lens that could be unscrewed, and because this lens is like 80 odd years old and it's just seized, much as a lot of the lens had seized, which is why it's taken me so long to actually get the thing in use. And he was saying he wasn't entirely sure if this bit that I thought would screw off, because he was of the opinion that that's actually just holding the rear elements in there and it won't just screw off. But yeah, we're making guesses there. And then he goes to me, well, how about we just file this bit down and just flatten it? And seeing that the lens has been butchered in a few places and it's got dents, it's got fungus and so on, a little bit of filing isn't really going to do any harm to it that hasn't already been done. So he literally just gets his file out and files it down, four places, top, bottom, left and right, and hey presto, it now fits through the standard. So it will, once I've finished sanding down my new lens board, it's gonna fit nicely. Which that brings us on to the 3D printing bit, which is the Forster family present for 2019 for Christmas. Three of the family have been really thrilled with the Forster family present.
So who isn't? Come on.
Well, it appears that I may have to buy something else for Christmas for my wife.
You mean she didn't appreciate being included in the family present of a 3D printer?
As far as I was concerned, she was included, but she's just decided that it's not really for her. Surprisingly,
have you not sort of wooed her, or brought her around with all the things you could 3D print for her?
Yeah, there is that, but it seems like the only things I can 3D print are things to do with cameras. It seems that's all it can do. That's all that's been coming off it. But the first thing that I printed was a negative holder for the DeVere 705 enlarger that was donated to the 6 Times Darkroom by Stephen Segersby. Yeah. And so when I went to collect that, he lent me the negative holders, which I measured with a micrometer, and then I inputted all of that into some software, and it spat out something that a 3D printer would understand. And incredibly, the two pieces I printed off just worked straight away.
Did you go running through to Mrs. Forster and with an excited boyish grin all over your face?
Of course.
And I bet she was ecstatic for you, wasn't she?
She smiled knowingly. And,
you know what you need to do? Make it up to her. Buy her a nice top of the range ironing board or something. That'll really straighten her out and make her feel loved. How about that?
I'm not so sure about that, but I think maybe 3D printed some flowers. Maybe that could be the way to go, and they'll last longer as well. Let's face it, so they'll be more practical. I think that's the way to go. So I've 3D printed those. I've done some lens caps for Exacta lenses, and then these lens boards, and I've really enjoyed doing them, and they work, which is the incredible thing. Everything I've actually done so far has worked. So I'm having great fun with it, and it's just I think it's one of those things that's going to become more prevalent in society as they start to make these things a bit better. Dave
Shrimpton had one in the corner of his darkroom, which I don't think he'd used yet. It was still sort of covered in plastic.
It's they're funny things, but they're not prime time yet. It's going to be a while before you see them in high streets shops where you can just go there with a vague understanding of how they work, put some things in and get something out of them. They're just not like that yet.
It will be eventually, won't it?
I think it will. I see no reason why not. And they're just such useful things. But you don't. I mean, I've got quite a big one, and it's that's what she says.
So they says,
yeah, and most people wouldn't need one quite as large as this one, but they or know what to do with it and so on.
I think you just need to stop.
Yeah, I'm printing a hole for myself, aren't I? There, but
you are
actually.
But seriously, I remember the years ago when personal computers first came out. So I had a ZX81. Youngsters listening to this show, if we haven't, he won't remember what a ZX81 is.
I had a Spectrum.
And the ZX81 had 1K of memory, so you'd take it home. I bought it from WH Smith's, and I unplugged it. I unboxed it, and you plug it in, and you're faced with a cursor blinking on the screen. And if you want it to do anything, you then read the book which came with it, which taught you Sinclair Basic Programming Language. So if you wanted to make this cursor move around the screen, you had to write a program for it. And now, of course, people just get a computer or a laptop or anything really, and all of that stuff is way hidden. First we had DOS, didn't we? And then we had different versions, and then Windows came in. And so the user interface means that you don't need to have that knowledge of computer program anymore. You can just unbox your computer and you can do all sorts of whiz-bang things on it with no understanding of what's going on. And maybe that's the way it'll go with 3D printing. That's when it'll really take off.
No, I'm pretty sure you're right. I'm not sure where we are in terms of the big scheme of things. I've been quite surprised to find out that people have been home 3D printing for like 5 years now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, certainly, I've mentioned him certainly off air, I think, to you, Todd Schlemmer, who makes 3D printed pinhole cameras and makes the files available on, I want to say free to air. What's that? What's that
Open
term?
source.
Open source, that's it, yeah. It's been a number of years since I think it must be at least 5 years he's been printing cameras.
Well, on the subject of printing cameras, Ethan Moses, Cameradactyl Branco-Pan.
Mm-hmm.
That's have we talked about that on this podcast? I know we've done the classic lenses, but perhaps we haven't. I've actually, you know why we didn't do it? Because it's not large format, but I think it's just worth just touching upon that, especially that Ethan was a guest on our show as well. And
he's a guest on everybody's show.
He's everywhere. Well, we came up with the term pod tart for him, didn't we? And that it seems to be sticking. So he's been going around. But more to the point, he's come up with this 35mm camera that's a panoramic camera because it's designed to work with a Mamiya universal press lens.
Yeah,
and that went on to Kickstarter last month, and I don't think it's actually finished yet, but it's got its backing, which is absolutely fantastic. So the idea was that if you backed it from at least $1, if it reached its goal, which it has, then you'll get sent the STL files, which is the file that the 3D printer understands and will spew something out. So he's going to be giving those out to anybody that's paid $1, and if you've paid more, then you get more things such as a laser. An etched laser etched?
An etched knob.
Yeah, an etched knob. Yes, you can have an etched knob. So when I've got an etched knob coming my way as well, so which is good. So I'm really excited about that, and I'll be able to print that next month. So looking forward to that. So is that it? I think that's pretty much what I've been up to.
I'm getting knowing looks or glares from my missus saying you haven't eaten yet. So,
yeah.
But it's only food, isn't it? This is much more interesting than eating. I did make a list of a few things. I've been looking on the Facebook group, and there's just folks. If you don't regularly visit our Facebook group, here's a few things for you to look for. Former guest of the show, Wayne Setzers, posted some great videos, actually. And he's posted another one about making use of filters for lenses that are either small or have got weird filter sizes. And he using some sticky back foam and some old filter casings. He makes little adapters for fitting 49mm threads, threaded filters to old filter lenses that probably don't have standard threads on or anything. So check that. I've not explained it very well, but if you go and look at Wayne Setzer's video that he posted, I think just within the last day or so. The other thing I know is that the Stearman Press makers of the SP445 developing tank, their 8x10 daylight tank has landed. Certainly it's gone out in the States, and I notice it's in the First Call photographic catalogue that came through my door today. I'm very excited when the First Call photographic catalogue drops through your door. So that's been listed in there, and I suspect it's available at Morco Photographic as well. They're a small company up in Newark, and I believe they are the main importers of the Stearman Press equipment, or at least they were. And he then supplies it on to people like First Call. So that 8x10 daylight loading and developing tank is available for folks who are looking for a way of developing 8x10 film.
Excellent.
Are you familiar with a Stearman Press 8x10?
I am.
Been following it?
I've certainly been. I was looking at the 4x5 one, and which ultimately ended up just making the one that I had work. And my combi plan actually successfully daylight developed something in my combi plan for the first time since I've had it. only 2 days ago. So having owned it for a year, so that's good news. But no, the actual 10x8 one, I've seen it, but I've not really got into it too much.
No, I haven't really. I followed the design. The design process of it is quite good at sharing all the various ups and downs of the design process. That's been quite interesting. But it's got various inserts you can do. I think 4x5 sheets, and it has inserts for 5x7, things like that. So seems to be. I think it's based on the old, what is it, the Patterson Orbitals type design. That sort of thing, that tray that has a light type opening. Have you got one of those?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, which I do need to do some digging as to how you work out your times for developing that, because it's constant agitation, so it's obviously a lot shorter.
I guess.
I don't know where. I think I've already asked this question once, but I don't think I've got an answer. But about where to actually look to find out times for constant agitation of film.
Well,
I haven't looked very hard.
The manufacturers all produce PDF data sheets, don't they? When Ilford produced a great set of PDF data sheets which give all sorts of useful information, it may well be there.
Right.
And I'm very keen and excited for the dry plate availability in the UK, because that Kickstarter is coming very rapidly to fruition. I think with all the Jason Lane's and Steve Lloyd's
Pictoria Graphica.
That's it. That's the word. Pictoria Graphica.
So that's Chromographica.
Chromographica. So that's going to be shipped soon-ish, I think, by the looks of it.
Well, and I can give an update on that.
Can you?
Yeah, a short one. And that's because we've just done episode 100 of the Classic Lenses podcast, and that was a little bit of a special. And and one of the things about it is that it's pretty much designed for YouTube. So anybody that's listening to it as an audio thing, it's not easy listening, because it's all about designing lenses with the software that Jason Lane uses to design lenses. Yeah. And
don't look at it on your computer screen. Don't look at it on your laptop, on your phone screen, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. Yeah, you need a decent sized screen. But anyway, as part of that episode at the end of it, I did ask him about how it's going, and I think he's got one more run to do, and hopefully then it will be good to go. So it sounds, barring any hitches, any Hamish Gill style hitches and pixelator, it looks as though they're very, very close to getting that going. Anyway, he's got a level of confidence. Largely based upon he's done some similar kind of things with some of these people before, so it's looking good.
Well, I reached out to Paul from Analog Wonderland. I've been buying odd bits from him recently and chatting with him via Instagram Messenger, I think it was. And if I read his cryptic remarks to me properly, he's actually got stocks of glass plates ready to put out on his website. I think whether he's got to just work out final selling prices or stuff, I don't know, but he announced Acros 2 and some other stuff the other day, and he'd already mentioned to me in his message that he had those, and I'm sure that he was hinting to me that the dry plates were ready to go as well. So that's really exciting.
Excellent, that's good news.
And that's it really for me.
Okay. Well, one more thing that I just want to touch upon, and that's to say thank you to those people that have donated to us on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com. Just search not Classic Lenses Podcast. Search Large Format Photography Podcast. And I think
you have to have the in front of it, I think, to find it.
Probably. Yeah, there's a reasonable chance that might be the case. I don't think the search engine works that well, which is, but it's in our notes. It's in our, if you want to just find our notes, and you can just click on it and it just takes you there. But I just want to say thanks to the 3 people that have donated to us since we were last on. I say 3, but I'm not entirely sure if James Thorpe donated and we said thank you to him last time. I can't quite remember, but
I think we say thank you to him every show.
Certainly most of them, definitely. And so let's say thanks to James Thorpe again, because he's done that. And while we've been on air, we've had a donation as well, which
was that from Max?
No, it wasn't. No, but I'll come on to that one in a minute, because we had one on the 18th of December, and that was from Christoph Sieglin, and he goes, "You made it to the Hall of Flame. Oh dear." By the way, I was guest on Backing Paper on the Sunday 16 podcast, which is their email show. And
yeah, I thought it was a curious choice for you to be on that.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. The worst reader out loud of things in the world was me. I think I only actually read out one letter, and it was one one email, and it was one that I actually sent into the show a couple of weeks prior, and I couldn't read my own email. So yeah, there you go. So Graham did all the rest of them, so I just commented, which is a lot easier. So Christoph Sieglin, you made it to the Hall of Fame within just 18 shows. I don't know where this Hall of Fame is exactly, but a big thank you for your thoughtful and inspirational interviews, as well as just the right pinch of technical topics. Thanks to Simon's insistent questions, it seems I can now understand the zone system at last. And Merry Christmas. Yeah, it's a case of, if I ask enough
maybe you can write back in and explain it to Simon then.
Yeah, because I've forgotten already. Yes, I've got some vague idea about what the zone system is now. I'm glad you can understand that now. And then finally, in today, in the last few minutes, we have Christopher J. May, another long-time donor to the podcast, and he goes,
go on, Simon, you can do it.
I'm trying. Here we go. Being a bit again. What? I don't know. I don't think that's actually me. I think that's actually what is written there. You're not helping me, Christopher. Been a bit again, but have really enjoyed catching up on the previous episodes. Maybe one of these days I'll actually find time to get my large format gear out again too. Cheers, gentlemen. Thank you, Christopher. Really appreciate it there. And we don't mind we're getting behind on shows and catching up eventually. In fact, that's probably the reason really why we actually just didn't do any podcasts for the last month or so. So thank you very much for those people who have donated to us.
Thank you.
Okay, we haven't had any emails for ages, which means that we must be doing an absolutely brilliant job of explaining absolutely everything that we say on the show. So I can't think of any other reason why we don't get emails. But if you do want to email the show, and we'll discuss your email, time permitting, how will people do that, Andrew?
That's a very good question. I think they might want to use an email address that goes something like the Large Format Photography Podcast at...
Go on, you can do it.
Yeah. I want to say Gmail?
Ooh,
Yahoo?
It might be Gmail.
I don't know. One of those.
It's Gmail.
Gmail? Is it?
It is.
I think my other one is... The one that Corey uses is Yahoo. So the Large Format Photography Podcast at gmail.com.
That's it.
You can probably be really old school and put googlemail.com as well. I'm sure that'll probably make it as well.
There's a reasonable chance. But stick with Gmail.
It'd be lovely. I don't think we'll ever be in a position where we have to do an email show, fortunately. But come on, guys. We like emails.
Yeah, and there's also another way to listen to the show other than the way that most people are doing it with podcatching software, iTunes and all that kind of stuff, and that is on YouTube. It's not a YouTube show, it's not video, it's just a picture, but you can listen to us on YouTube, and you can also put captioning in there and have a good laugh to see what YouTube thinks that we're actually saying. I've yet to actually check. In fact, we should really do this. So I'm going to say Scheinflug principle, and just see what actually comes up there when it says that. And I guess my pronunciation might confuse it just a little bit as well, maybe. So that's it. Any shout outs this week, Andrew?
No, not really. I've shouted a few people out, haven't I? Wayne and Dave Shrimpton.
Okay, and I'll give my usual shout out to the Six Towns Darkroom in Stoke-on-Trent, and that's where I go on a Tuesday night from 7 o'clock till quite late. So if anybody wants to come down and do a bit of printing, talk cameras, doesn't have to be large format, but it will actually be able to use our large format enlarger. We've got one, thanks to Stephen Segersby. So we need to get some those filters called that go underneath, contrast filters, and the holder and all that kind of stuff. So we're slightly limited on contrast, but we've got some old grady paper.
Mr. CAD you can get them for about 35 quid, which is about half the list price, and so that seems a reasonable price.
That does. That sounds very reasonable to me.
You can go to Mr. CAD and hit him up, and he'll find some for you.
Yeah. No, that sounds a good idea. So if you're in Cheshire, North Staffordshire, Eastern Shropshire, Western Derbyshire, just come down, and you can get in touch. Best way to do it, and I'll just do my contact details at the same time now. I'm on Twitter as Simon4, and I'm on Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic. So you can use either of those two things to message me directly if you want to get some more details about the Six Towns Darkroom and where it is and all of that kind of stuff. And it's free as well. Certainly the first couple of visits are free, and you can print and do stuff, and it's all for nothing. And they charge you 20 quid a session after that. yeah, we just take bank details and just take out whatever we need. So that's my shout outs, and you can also hear me on the Classic Lenses podcast as well every week. How about yourself, Andrew?
You can catch me on Twitter at WarboySnapper. You can catch me hanging around the Large Format Photography Podcast Facebook group. I'm on Instagram as WarboySnapper. And you can hear me every 2 weeks with Corey Cannon, the wonderful Corey Cannon, on the Lensless podcast. So we'll be putting one of those shows out this weekend, I believe.
Our Facebook group says, just got to say.
It is, yeah. There was, it's not the time to perhaps chat about it now, but there was an interesting rant, I suppose it will say. It was not so much a tweet, more of a dawn chorus by Emulsive, M from Emulsive, about whether Twitter is quite the friendly community that it used to be. And I did make the point that, well, actually, the two Facebook groups that I help run are really, really engaging and friendly. And I think it's because people want to be there. They have to make a commitment, and they have to positively go to be in that group. Whereas Twitter, pretty much anybody can join in, can't they? No matter what your interest.
Yeah. And I just realised I do have a quick shout out to make, because at the end of Back in Paper, you'll hear Graham talking about a postcard that came through. And I was sitting here and he was starting to describe this postcard. I was thinking, that sounds familiar. And he described it and goes, I've got one of those as well. And I'll read out part of it because it's addressed to Andrew and Simon first, but also to Johnny Perry and me again. And it's a darkroom print on postcard paper. Mm-hmm. And it's a good print. And but the thing is, on both my postcard and the one to Graham, or Sunny 16 to be more precise, it didn't actually say who it was from on either card.
Oh,
yeah. So a mystery one. Now I do actually know who sent it now, because he did actually send an email having heard me talking about this, and Graham talking about this on Back in Paper. And I can announce the mystery sender of the postcard was none other than Graham Young of the Homemade Camera podcast. And he'd forgotten. He'd just forgotten to stick his name on both cards. So we knew he was from Florida, but that was about the only clue that we really had on it.
That postcard paper is really good, and I promote it where I can, and recommend.
Well, it's definitely
you
something, but we appear to have lost Andrew there. So we're going to leave everybody hanging as to what Andrew was about to say about this postcard paper. But I can say, though, that thank you, Graham, for sending this. That's Graham Young for the Homemade Camera podcast. And great. It's good to have that. And that's actually pretty much the end of the show anyway. So I know Andrew's decided to go off and eat his tea. I just want to thank everybody that listens to us. Thank you to Max, who was on the show earlier. That was a great chat that we had there. And that's it. Our music is called Two Finger Johnny, and that's by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. And that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's show, and it'd be great if you can come and listen to us in another fortnight. So goodbye.
Bye.
And goodbye,
if you can hear me.
Andrew.
Did you lose me there? You still lost me.
Hello there, Simon here. I'm back at the end of the editing, and I've just realised that something that even more horrible went wrong with the recording than I thought. Because it actually turned out that, well, as you've already just heard, Andrew never actually left the podcast, and what actually happened is I switched my volume off. So I couldn't hear Andrew, you could hear Andrew, and that's why I ended up talking over him at the end. So really sorry about that, Andrew. But that's it. So I've already said goodbye, but I'll say goodbye again. And you heard Andrew say goodbye, so hopefully you'll listen to us again in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.